unpopular opinion here. I'm not as focused on the MQL. I'm more focused on the SQL. I need to be driving qualified leads to our sales team to help that drive revenue growth. And so that's really, as a marketing leader, what I care about is helping drive revenue growth. And so while the MQL might be dead for me, maybe not, dead's a strong word, I'm really more about providing the best experience all the way through than saying, "Ooh, my team got 10 MQLs this month. Yay, us." I'd rather say, "Hey, I helped make a knockout prospect experience, now customer experience for X, Y, and Z, and we helped hit our revenue goals." That's far more important to me than hitting my MQL goal.
Welcome to the show, everybody. And today we have Kendra Ellis on the show. Kendra is the Senior Director of Growth Marketing at RevPartners. And RevPartners is really focused on being more experienced with less risk, and so that you get better value whenever you're looking to grow. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I am going to jump right in because I've been sleuthing over your LinkedIn a little bit, right? So I have some very interesting questions for you. But I think the thing that I would like to talk about first is, we were talking about this right before we started to hit record, and you were talking about moving into a much larger organization, and it was kind of like drinking from the fire hose a little bit. And I think most people who have stepped into these kinds of roles are very familiar with that. But I'm curious, do you have you found anything to kind of deal with that drinking from the fire hose and keeping it all manageable whenever you're going into a new role?
Absolutely. And honestly, the organization size, I feel like no matter what that might look like, it's always drinking from a fire hose. And especially if you're the personality type that I am, you're pretty much wanting to be perfect outside of day one, right? So
for sure.
A couple of the tips that I have used across my onboarding journeys over my career history is really be a great note taker. Not only because I will need that after 15 meetings in one day, let alone a whole entire week, then I can really look back on what those action items are, what I was thinking about in that moment, and then what my top priorities are for focusing on during that time when I have a little bit of free time to actually get some heads down work done.
Absolutely. The second brain concept, I know lots of people take it very seriously and they kind of have it really built out, but I think just at the minimum, being a really great note taker removes that kind of anxiety, that moment of waking up in the middle of the night of oh my God, I got to do this, right? Because you've forgotten about it. I tell some of my clients, if you're choosing to not write it down, you're choosing to accept the pressure to be a perfect recall machine, and we're not. So any other tips?
Really make sure that the rest of your organization is on point. So for me, I even color code my calendar. So I can, at a week's glance, know how many client-facing calls I have, how many employee development calls I have, how many personal things I have bringing into my day, how much focus time I have, just by looking at the whole entire week. That really sets me up for success, not only from a mental standpoint, but also what are the things I need to do in order to make sure my day is set up for success based on what that color coding system is telling me within 5 minutes of starting my day.
I love that. For me, mine runs a little bit differently. And so I have a bunch of different calendars because I'll have client calendars and different things like that. So the idea of color coding it is ooh, I should really do this, but I think it would throw me off a little bit, right? As far as going in and making a big adjustment to it now. Okay, I want to dive into the employee development stuff, right? Because it's it's probably the most important part of being a leader, in my opinion, right? Because I have been on teams where everyone is expecting me to have it and there's no real development or, coaching or education. And now I try to fight for you gotta give people the information and skills they need to do a good job. And then sometimes it's just hard to get people to want to spend the time with us to do the learning, to do the upskilling and stuff. How do you get people on your team to be excited about development and training and improvement?
A couple of different ways. So, what I do when I first start working with someone new on my team is I really understand kind of almost their personality trait and how they work best when being coached, mentored, and trained, and
Hmm.
cater my style to what theirs is rather than the opposite way around. So that's kind of setting the foundation for anything in the future that we may need to address, whether it be a training opportunity or even a difficult conversation. So that's kind of
Absolutely.
where I start from a baseline. In order to get people excited about change management, opportunities for growth, I bring them along in what I call Kendra's magical universe. And what that really looks like as a continuous improvement look at what we do today and where we could take it in the future to make it even better than it already is. And by doing that, it really involves them in a larger, bigger picture way that helps them make them feel like a bigger part of the team. So that when we go then to do an individual work session about something more minor in terms of their role specifically, we're
Hmm.
both on the same page about where we might be headed as a team or as an organization while we're doing this individual coaching slash work session on what they need help with at that moment.
Interesting. Okay. So going back a little bit, I'm so big fan of DISC, but I like all personality assessments. Is there one that you prefer to use whenever you're working with your teams and the new people on your team to really understand how to speak to them and how to meet them, if not exactly where they are, at least halfway?
Yes, I actually do have a personal favorite, and it's not disc.
Mm,
I've been on probably six or seven different ones, and
hmm.
I've found the most sticky version of personality traits might be a combination of two, but my favorite is called Real Colors, and it's
Mm,
based on just four color types, and you are a little bit of each one, but then you have a very predominant color that you tend to lead with, and then you have a supporting color that you also lean on when your subconscious takes over. And I
interesting.
really like it because it's very easy to remember. Oh, I can't remember if I'm an ENFJ or a
Oh yeah.
ESC or no, I am a gold and I have a blue backer, and that's the two that I lead with primarily. And so I always talk in terms of, okay, I feel your green really coming out. So let's focus on how we do X, Y, and Z very methodically based on how you're thinking in terms of a green.
Mm.
And it really has helped monumentally, not only in having conversations on a regular basis with your team, but also being able to coach and mentor them and meet them where they're at and the way they need to hear and receive information.
Yeah, I love I love that, right? I've been a disc head for a very long time. It was honestly the thing that kind of got me opened up to the idea that I wasn't really super serious about like my craft and my role of selling, right? And I like all of them, honestly. Strength finders and Enneagram and People Index and culture. Like I take everyone I can get my hands on. And I do think, everyone talks about Myers Briggs, but like it's really hard to use, I think, in like either in a sales context of being able to kind of figure out how someone wants to communicate or to quickly use, I think, whenever you're coaching and leading other people. But I agree with you. If you can establish that foundation, like you can coach so much deeper because then it doesn't feel like character assassination, right? It's like, hey, this is just who you are. And, it's going to create some unique strengths, but also some challenges and some things to be aware of. What's the other one that you like?
The Strengths Finder, you
The
named
strength
it.
finders. Okay.
Yep.
I've done that one and like everyone I know knows theirs, right? Because it feels like it's very inward focused, right? As opposed to something that you can like kind of hold as like a reference tool or something else like this when you're working with other people. Or have you found it similar in that kind of way? It's more for like inward reflection and improvement as opposed to being able to kind of using it for coaching and development.
Are you referring to Real Colors?
No, strength finders.
I do feel like it tends to be inward facing, as in you remember yours, but you don't remember anyone else's, because
100%.
there's five of them, right? So you actually maybe only remember your top two or top three, but remembering everybody else's, it may not be as prevalent in the front of your mind, even if
Hmm.
you are a people leader, right? Because if you have, say, even five direct reports, that's remembering 25 strengths
Yeah.
across the board.
Absolutely. So you're moving into this new role, right? And I'm not going to try to pry into anything that you're not allowed to talk about or anything else like that. But when you were deciding to leave SmartBug and you were casting around looking for the next job, right? Like I'm of the opinion that people in the roles like ours, you have to vet completely differently and with like a higher level of discernment than lots of other roles. What were you looking for when you were looking for a new role? Were you like super specific, or were you just kind of feeling like it was time to leave and go find like the next challenge?
Well, honestly, I actually was not looking.
Oh,
It kind
really?
of happened very organically, very magically, I'll even call it. I had been seeing Brendan Tollison in my newsfeed on LinkedIn, and I was like, man, I just feel compelled to message him. And I never did because it's like, I don't really want to be a creepy stalker or anything. He doesn't even know me. Like,
Or a salesperson,
yeah, right. Like,
right?
I'm not here to sell you anything, but no. And then we were magically introduced shortly after that, and we got to talking about our love and our passion for the employee experience. We got to talking about, my magical universe, actually, and how I see the employee experience really affecting what we do as a business, as a services business, and
Mm-hmm.
how that can really take it in either direction depending on what way the employee experience is going. And it just kind of snowballed into this magical, beautiful thing that we were like, yeah, we want to do this. We want to build this. We want to grow this, and we want to do it together.
Hmm.
And so honestly, that's kind of just how it all fell into place. It was not something that I was really out seeking. Although I have always kept in the back of my mind, because I'm so obsessed with HubSpot, I can't ever see myself being in an organization that isn't HubSpot obsessed.
Interesting.
And unless some magical universe happens where I get to bring HubSpot in, that may happen. But outside of that, I'm in love with HubSpot, and I can't imagine being in an atmosphere without using that as my single source of truth.
Interesting. So where does the HubSpot love come from? Was that from your time at SmartBug, or did you develop it before that and SmartBug was already running on HubSpot?
Oh yes, HubSpot and SmartBug have been together for a very long time.
Okay.
My first experience was actually when I was serving in a boutique agency here locally, and they were just establishing themselves as a HubSpot partner as well. And I kind of started digging in to build that line of business for them.
Interesting.
And I just kind of fell in love with the whole concept. I'm very organized, I'm very structured. I want to make the employee and the client experience like amazing. So this was a tool that I felt was really adaptable. And I loved that aspect of it. So then that kind of grew from there, and I went to Inbound a few times and met
Cool.
amazing, smart people. And from there, I was an in-house leader for the majority of my career. And so every single time I'd be like, we're getting HubSpot, we're adopting it. And I was on board, and I was like, yes, everyone's wearing orange. Even if our brand
Wow.
colors aren't orange, we're wearing orange.
So okay, because you like it so much, and I just love looking at the other side of it. What do you not love about HubSpot? Like, where do you think it is not doing a good job of being the industry leader, if anywhere?
Um, the troubles that I used to have with it, they've really expanded their product offering. So, back when I was an in-house leader, I did a lot of events and trade shows. This was obviously pre-pandemic. And I just felt like Eventbrite's integration, for example, I love Eventbrite, but the integration itself was not doing what I needed it to do as an in-house marketing leader. Both Eventbrite and HubSpot have answered that big pain point that was really a sore spot for me in my past life. They're also doing really beautiful things outside of just the marketing and sales components, with Service Hub and Ops Hub and CMS. The only other thing I can maybe think of is, those really small business owners, which is not their primary demographic necessarily, but for a small business owner really needing to succeed, I'm still a HubSpot obsessed person. So, for my husband's business, I onboarded us onto HubSpot, obviously. But there are a little bit of hiccups there just from a very small startup component, but
Okay.
that's not their primary. So I don't hold that against them.
Interesting. Yeah, I love the depth there, right? Because I had an interaction well when I first started my business. It was just to be a CRM consultant, right? And so there was a tool that I liked, Pipedrive, and we'd been using it in a startup I was working on, and so I just got certified there. And then I was looking for other systems, and I had just like a really rough experience with like one of the HubSpot salespeople, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. And now we're doing projects on HubSpot and supporting teams on HubSpot, and the tools really come a super super long way. It's really really cool to see. So what I would like to talk about with you, right? Because I think that this is probably one of the most unique things. Can we talk a little bit about the differences between like sales as a function and marketing as a function, right? Because I feel like sales side, everyone thinks that they can do marketing, and everyone marketing thinks that they can do sales and everything. And I kind of think of it as like there's a Venn diagram here. There's some overlap between these two roles, but they're fundamentally very different in how they're executed and also how to think about them. What are your, like, do you agree with that? Do you see these kind of fighting for turf and everyone having opinions, but like those opinions are tied too much to like how they got to like the leadership level? Or like, is that something you run into?
Very much so. When I was in-house, I ran into this a lot. And really, if you look at the symptomatic problems, it's not the root cause. The root cause are the way both of these teams are set up to almost be pit against each other. So sales has commission, and they may get a larger commission for having cold calls or having a lead source that's dedicated directly from them. So naturally, they're not going to want to update the CRM in the most accurate way, because then it affects their livelihood, it affects their well-being. Marketing is tasked with bringing in leads into the funnel, and if sales does not close them, they may not be very qualified. And so just from the very get-go, we've been pit against each other based on old traditional models of how we track and measure success of those individual teams. But I think as you see the market shifting, as you see these two teams shifting, what you will see, this beautiful thing happening, is this marketing and sales alignment, where they understand the end goal at the end of the day is two very important things: the customer experience, and obviously the revenue goals being hit. And if they do not work together, they're going to see that failure is going to be inevitable with both of those things, and then nobody wins. So I really think as ABM becomes a more prevalent strategy, you're going to see much more alignment with those two teams, and possibly they will never be completely together in terms of like under one roof, but they'll certainly be working lockstep. And those companies that are really excelling and achieving those today, I'm sure that you're seeing, if you lift up the hood, that those sales and marketing teams are in lockstep with one another.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's watching this and they're not familiar with the acronym, ABM is account-based marketing, and it's like the opposite of spray and pray. If you're not familiar with it, it's deep research, deep relevancy, understanding them at a very deep level, as opposed to here's what we're great at, you're going to love us kind of situation. Okay, so how does, because everyone talks about sales process, right? And then there's the buyer's journey. Oftentimes they do not line up whatsoever, right? And so you have sales leaders and they're pounding activities, and I've been this guy. And then you have marketing is like, hey, like wait for the content, wait for the messaging to take hold. How do you think about aligning these two teams so that way you're not trying to force people through a process that doesn't align with the buyer's journey?
I think that there is a number of different things that you can do to cater to both of those things.
Okay.
A lot of times I have seen in the past where, and it's not even just sales, there are other departments that are pushing to move forward before quote unquote marketing is ready. So you just have an ability or a need to pivot and kind of, I won't even say compromise, but you just need to remember as marketers or whoever's in the position of moving faster than they like, is that at the end of the day, it's about the customer journey. It's about the customer experience. And whatever you can do and working lockstep with those other team members to make that experience better is going to win overall. So the one thing, okay, I'll give an example where we might push a demo or scheduling a demo or scheduling a consultation before a customer or prospect is ready, right? So marketing saying, hold your jets, let me give this ebook to them first. And sales is like, I got to hit my quota. We got to send them a consultation request. At the end of the day, what you need to do is take a look at your data behind the scenes to tell that driven story. If it's not affecting your prospect's journey negatively, then I would say that you need to work together to find the new route of where you maybe move that task or that CTA up in the journey. If you are seeing data that's negatively affecting that experience, that will arm you with the information and the data to suggest and recommend that we need to make sure that we're waiting until that prospect is ready for that request.
Interesting. I like the idea, as long as it's not impacting them negatively. Right. Like, because learning and realizing that marketing is largely just like testing hypotheses and then, figuring out like what works was kind of a game changer for me. How can you tell, or, this might be too in the weeds and it's okay to say, that's too in the weeds. How do you know if it's going to potentially impact something negatively? Is that just like looking back at your data and your trends and mapping, or is it very situational?
I would say that, at least for us specifically, data is the number one source of truth for everything that we do. We measure everything from a 30,000 foot view in the data all the way down to how an individual email is performing. And the reason why we do that is because there's different triggers that tell us different things, and that allows us to make the most informed decisions. Now, there will be some that are in what we call like a benchmarking phase where we don't have any previous data. Yeah. But I always like to err on the side of caution, because once we give that negative experience to someone, it's really hard to bring them back. So Absolutely. I like to start with tried and true campaigns, strategies, measures that I know is going to make positive effects, and then start to understand what the data is telling me in order to then move outside of that.
Interesting. Okay. So I have a slew of questions from that response, but really, really great response. So, knowing that data is the backstop, right? And that's what you're going to go be looking at, right? And you talked about HubSpot being a single source of truth, which I fully stand behind, right? But we also kind of talked about smaller business, right? Your husband specifically, and how HubSpot is not really kind of like an ideal solution for them. If you're small, or let's just say you want to move in a more data-driven direction, are there any lightweight ways of starting to move in that direction before you make a big, huge investment in something like HubSpot before you're ready?
Yes. Short answer. And I will caveat that with saying, like, we did onboard to HubSpot immediately. There's just some of those nice to have tools that we're just not ready for. And so, it's all about timing. But I will say that I still started with HubSpot in terms of like data-driven reporting. But you do also have, the Google Analytics. SEMrush also is a very effective tool in which you can get a free trial, when you're a very, very, very small business and need to really line item out your budget to make sure that you're being responsible with what you have at the time. There's a number of those types of tools that I use in terms of the free version until we can ramp up and get to more of past that point where we have some budget to support those extra nice to have tools.
Interesting. Okay. I like that answer. When, let's say that someone is completely sales led, right? And they want to move in a direction of bringing in some marketing and taking some of the pressure off of the sales team and everything else like this. But it's day one, day zero. Like, do you have any kind of tips or tricks to start to move in that direction, so that way, you can be building without the pressure of it immediately needing to like kick off and work, right? Because like sometimes, salespeople and marketing people are brought in of like, this better work, right? And you don't really get a whole lot of time to figure it out. But from an small business level, you want to move in a marketing direction. What are some steps or some directions to kind of move purposefully in that direction without putting a lot of pressure on like immediate results?
Do you mean in terms of like what data we should be looking at, or like what should I look for in a hire?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Let's start with the data, right? If you want to move in that direction and you don't have any data, let's just say that everything has been running out of your inbox and out of like an Excel spreadsheet that's in Drive that you sometimes correct and update and everything. What should those first couple of steps look like?
So typically what I do, when either kicking off with someone new, or I did this for my husband's business also, I do almost like what I call kind of like a playbook. It's like a SWOT analysis, competitive research, so that I can use other people in the space to benchmark where I see us needing to go. And that could be anything from what are they ranking for keywords, how many visitors are going to their site. I can even look into their website to see what they're using for marketing automation, for CMS platform. So I use some of these back-end tools to kind of create a benchmark before we have our own.
Okay.
That's primarily where I start to at least set the stage for creating a 30, 60, 90-day plan in terms of marketing.
Okay. Interesting. And then swapping to the other part of the question, because I think it's very interesting as well. Like if you've never had a marketer on the team and you decide that you want to go hire one, like what should you be looking for in that kind of specific situation, right? Like, do you go for the jack of all trades, or do you go for the super specific because you can find a silo or a way that you're excited about?
So I would tend to go for a jack of all trades, although I'm not a big proponent of jack of all trades. I really love SMEs. But in terms of small business and just getting started, I feel like jack of all trades are also used to this very specific cadence that startups just naturally fall into. And so when you have that jack of all trades, they're used to running that way. They're used to wearing different hats, even if it's not even technically marketing. There are a few hats that marketing plays that you're not necessarily going to find in one human. So you may also need to set aside some budget to outsource some of those duties. For example, web dev. You're not likely going to find a jack of all trades that can design a beautiful flyer, implement your CRM database, and develop your website. Highly unlikely you're going to find that. If you do, let me know, because they
Interesting. Okay. So God, I have so many marketing questions because I'm really like I didn't appreciate marketing whenever I was working corporate side, and then whenever I moved into like field sales for like an independent distributor, it was obviously a significant drop off. And then whenever I was doing my first kind of startup with a business partner, we didn't have any at all, right? And so then I realized really what it's like to sell without any marketing or any brand behind you. Like it is a very different existence. Can we talk a little bit about this idea of benchmarking and also kind of proving out your own data, right? Because, hearing what you said of like, okay, I'm going to go do some research, right? Of like where we think we can be, sometimes doing the work that I do, I'll hear a lot of, well, this is where we should be kind of situation. And I'm a bigger proponent of like, okay, it's nice to have goals, but we should be benchmarking our own data so that way we can then like really accurate. We're not talking about should, we're talking about the reality versus the goal, and we can plot a path from there. How do you talk about that with your clients to make sure that they're not chasing silver bullets or doing stuff that isn't really going to help them in working towards the success that they're looking for?
Well, I seek to understand first. So if I see a goal that I think might be a BHAG, which is big, hairy, audacious goal,
Yep.
I ask questions to see how they derived from that specific goal that we're talking through that day. If they have any benchmark data, if they don't, what research that they've done or have not done. Then, as I mentioned earlier, I do go through my own process of setting them up for success in terms of where I think that they're at with maturity levels,
Okay.
and then where we can set our 30, 60, 90-day plan. Typically, I like creating our own benchmarks if at all possible. And that's not just like a 30-day thing. Optimally would do at least a quarter, if not 2 or 3 quarters, to really understand The data, a lot of people in different industries have ebbs and flows. And so if we don't look at an entire year's data, we can't catch those things, right?
Absolutely.
In higher education, there's obvious trends where you see an uptick and then when you see maybe a dip in things. And so a lot of industries have those. And without that proper benchmarking time period, you just can't be confident in what you're striving for.
Oh, beautiful answer, honestly. When I used to play poker a long time ago and was working with a coach, and I was frustrated over like one day's results. And he was like, dude, your sample size is like nothing at all. And like, I didn't understand like the impact of the sample size on like being able to find accurate trends and data like worth going after. Very, very super helpful. And, a quarter minimum is kind of how I think about it now, because like, everyone can have a great week, a great month. It's over that longer duration that we really kind of see where the gaps and the challenges are going to be.
You also hit on a great point, sample size. So in marketing, especially in the top funnel data, like being able to make business related decisions, even just for the marketing team, you can't benchmark something off of 50 sessions, right? You can't benchmark it off 5 clicks. You can't benchmark it off one email going out to 50 people. You really need a sizable sample in order to say, I feel good about this as a benchmark, to say like this is accurate depiction of what we're going to see, right? So it's all about really understanding your sample size and the time period in which you have taken that.
You and me are on the same page there, and I hope everyone who's listening hears that as well, because like the sample size is indicative of whether or not you actually have anything or not. So yeah, very interesting. Now, so this leads me to my next question, right? Because whenever I first started to learn about like data-driven marketing and data-driven selling and backfilling with intention and forecasting, I was like, oh my God, this is going to make everything so much easier, because like we can't argue with the data, right? And I have had some interactions with teams that I've supported and leaders that I've worked under and stuff, to where even though there was data, like there was still had to sell them on the idea that like, hey, we need to test or we need to make a change and stuff like that, because the data is data, but it doesn't necessarily tell the same story to like everyone that you're showing it to. Have you had any situations to where you've had a clear data that leads to a clear hypothesis, but you still have to go sell it to leadership because they're looking at the data differently?
Oh, 100%. There's a couple of big outliers that I would lump these under. And one is, I don't trust my data. I don't trust the data you're showing me that's driving your hypothesis to make this decision. There's that component. And then the other side of it is you have to be very careful with data, because there's so much of it. You want to make sure that you're telling the data-driven story that person cares about and needs to see in order to understand and make the decision with you. If you just throw all of these dashboards and all of these reports to someone on, for example, the leadership team, they may or may not understand what the story is that you're trying to tell them, except for marketing's throwing all of these fancy acronyms and all of these reports at me, and I don't really know what they're expecting me to do with this.
Interesting. Okay. How do you get better as a marketer, like telling the story of data, so that way you have buy-in to like run the tests, to run the campaigns that you want to run?
So I use this analogy often. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so what you really need to do is break down your data-driven story piece by piece to make sure that you're telling a compelling story that gets you to the end result. And also something that's part of RP, my RevPartners training, we do something called bluff, which is bottom line up front. Which I think is an amazing component that I cannot believe has just now come to me in my career journey. But we always make sure that we recap in one sentence, and it's the first thing we do. So whoever you're talking to, whoever you're working with, they know what the end result that you're trying to get to very first, right out of the gate. And then you use supporting information to actually prove and tell that story from there.
I'm writing a note because I love like I'm a very direct and very like, hey, let's save the time. Let's, and I've never heard of that before. So I had to write that down because I'm going to blatantly steal it and use it, but I will give you guys credit whenever as I'm stealing it. Um, okay. Can you talk about a time whenever you use data to get buy-in around a thing and then it didn't go according to plan? Like, have you ever had blowback over like trying to sell leadership or, executive team on like a campaign or something, and then it failed and you kind of had to go back and kind of like suffer through the
Between your
outcome?
legs kind of thing.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I will say that, as a marketer who's been in this field for 17 years, I've had a lot of campaigns that have not gone according to plan. But the nice thing is that since I've really taken the data-driven approach and had the tools and resources to pull that data, how I approach continuous improvement of campaigns is I show how the expectations weren't met, and then I also I bring that back with how we're going to improve that campaign in the future by the data and what the data is telling me, rather. So it's less of this campaign was a complete failure because X, Y, and Z goals weren't hit. It's more of a, here are the components of the campaign that is working based on the black and white data I'm seeing. And here is the part of the data that's not quite making the cut, and how we're going to make changes to the overall campaign to bump those up.
Interesting. Okay. So to that end, right? Like it's super easy to kind of like over segment and have like gated content, and everything requires an email opt-in. So you're tracking and everything. And there's obviously a lot of pushback around like making things more accessible, not putting it behind paywalls, zero-click content, all these very interesting terms. How do you meet in the middle as a data-driven marketer, but still kind of like holding that we need to make it easy for people to like take the motions and the steps that they want to take without them feeling like they're like walking into a dungeon with the door shutting behind them at every interaction?
Yes. So there is a large debate that's been happening for quite a while now between marketing professionals. I mean, obviously it's very tongue in cheek, but it's the gated versus ungated debate, right? I'm very much so on an ungated on the ungated side of things. So you won't hear any complaints from me for having like no forms behind ebooks, things of that nature. One, if you put it on a beautiful pillar page, it's very easily consumable by your prospects and your clients or customers. It provides a better overall user experience. Google loves pillar pages over gated content, so you're going to get credit from them as well, or any other search engine for that matter. So where I stand in terms of gated content and being able to track it from a marketer's perspective is really like, what are the things that we would typically have in our product or service offering that we're willing to give prospects before they sign the dotted line for something else or our main competitive advantage. Those are the things I might tend to gate, but outside of that, I'm pretty ungated as a marketer. Unpopular opinion here, I'm not as focused on the MQL. I'm more focused on the SQL. I need to be driving qualified leads to our sales team to help that drive revenue growth. And so that's really, as a marketing leader, what I care about is helping drive revenue growth. And so while the MQL might be dead for me, maybe not, dead's a strong word, I'm really more about providing the best experience all the way through than saying, "Ooh, my team got 10 MQLs this month. Yay, us." I'd rather say, "Hey, I helped make a knockout prospect experience, now customer experience for X, Y, and Z, and we helped hit our revenue goals." That's far more important to me than hitting my MQL goal.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. And, as a sales guy, it's odd to me whenever I see people fighting for the land of the MQL versus the SQL and stuff like that. It's just, it's very interesting. And then I see people, especially like outside marketers and consultants who are trying to sell like hot leads, but Like, some of these people are selling form abandoned leads and trying to like label them as hot, and it's just like, what are you doing? I don't understand. Okay, you've mentioned services a couple of times over this call, and I'm a big fan of like services over just like standalone products and widgets and everything. Is there a big difference marketing services versus like a standalone product?
I would say yes. I've been in the services industry for a while now, but I did originally start my career in more like product focused
Okay.
areas. With a product, I won't say it's easier, but because you have a tangible thing or a widget, for whatever reason, the perception of value is much easier to market, quote unquote,
Oh yeah.
rather than humans' time. Although, if you ask me personally, I would say that a human's time and their expertise is worth far more than a widget that's going to sit there and, yes, do what I hope it does for me. But
Hmm.
an expertise helps me far longer than probably a widget would.
I like completely could not agree more on both fronts. Like I'm better at selling someone else's product than I am at selling my own services and help, right? Because I don't do the whole like, guarantee this kind of thing or, 10x your business. And I don't do any of that stuff, right? And so it's like, okay, John, what am I going to get? Help, and then it's kind of like a very awkward and interesting conversation of like, okay, what kind of help? Well, what do you need? And like really trying to vet it out from there. It's been like, I tell everyone, this is the hardest stuff I've ever sold, right? As far as like helping people with the soft skill foundational improvement of being good conversationalists and good leaders. And because everyone thinks they're already fine, right? Whereas like if I was creating a new CRM for people, it would be easier to show the value kind of situation. Um, so have you found any cool, unique ways of improving marketing for services that doesn't come from like product, like it comes from your time of being on the service side?
Honestly, I think that a lot of the way marketers think, act, and do is shifting, and a lot of it's not even based by our own expertise necessarily. It's based on consumer demand and what they're telling us that they're going to do.
Hmm.
So I think that really being transparent, being empathetic, having them understand that we are here and we truly do care, and here are the ways that in which that we do care and that we are transparent, and here are the ways and our promises that we're going to hold our end up of the bargain. And I really think that resonates far more with people, in addition to that referral component. And what I mean by referral component is having an unbiased party also then back you up, so that your say do commitment isn't just coming from your voice, it's coming from someone else who doesn't have quote unquote shtick in the game.
Hmm. Okay. So is that like social proof, like testimonials and reviews and case studies and things like that?
In a way, yes. I mean, it can
Okay.
come in social proof, it can come in referral programs, it can come in retention and loyalty programs. But yes, at the end of the day, it's based on outsiders having experienced what you do and you proving your value to them, and then they're praising you for that because you did what you said you were going to do.
Interesting. Um, when you're thinking about, because marketing is a moving environment, right? Like, it seems like it's rapidly iterating, and sales is very similar, but I do think that marketing moves faster, I think, than sales does. What are you seeing that you're excited about as far as like new ideas, new technology, new ways of getting it done? Anything standing out to you as something you're really excited about?
I'm keeping my eye, as I'm sure all of us are, but obviously I'm keeping my eye on AI and
Hmm.
all of the tools that are coming out of AI. I see this as a way to be more efficient in a lot of ways, and I also see that this is probably also going to come with a lot of bad rep in terms of having people too heavily rely on that from a content production standpoint. So I want to keep my eye on how that continues to evolve and how people utilize it. I think that it could be a very, very amazing tool for us to utilize and tap into. Do I think that it should replace humans? Oh, certainly not at this time. I mean,
So you're not on the bus that all sales and marketing jobs are going out the window because like AI can spit out a paragraph of text.
not from what I've seen. I mean, I've definitely done a lot of testing, comparatively speaking, from a human to even ChatGPT 4, but it's not there yet. But I think that we're going to continue to get creative on how we use AI. And how it could potentially replace some roles, but I do think that we will continue to evolve as a sales and marketing team, and use it in ways that will benefit our clients instead of hurt them.
Interesting. Okay. So we're going to get a little bit deeper here, okay? Because, I'm curious, what does Kendra view as her craft currently? Is it like the leadership stuff, like motivating and encouraging people? Like, do you still view marketing as like your core craft and like something you're really staying on top of? What are you working on, like keeping the edge on in your current state?
I'm 100% always aiming to improve as a people leader, as a coach, a mentor. I feel like that is how you can have the greatest impact, from different teams to different people, organization wide. And that's really what I've always been truly, truly passionate about is helping others live out their dream, whether it's coaching and mentoring, whether it's that's why I got into marketing, was to help others live their dream. Kendra, I love being a pottery maker, but I don't know how to actually get it out into the world. Well, let me help you live your dream doing what I do, so that people can find you and people can work with you and people can buy from you. So really that one component has always been my constant, is making an impact on others so that they can live their dream. So that's probably what I'm most focused on. Although I will say, building out that customer experience for my team specifically is also something I'm very passionate about. And I need to keep on top of that because client expectations do change and continue to evolve. So I'm always trying to keep on top of those expectations that are coming from them.
Interesting. Okay. I love that. How do you go about measuring and improving in your craft as a leader?
Yeah, that's tough.
Welcome to the real show, everybody.
I know, here comes the real data-driven stuff. How do you measure effectiveness as a people leader when it's a completely gray area, right? There's no hard and fast metrics. What we use primarily is have always been a big proponent of 360 surveys. And interviews. For those of you listening that aren't familiar with 360s, it's pretty much an anonymous survey that goes out to members of your team, your peers, your leadership, and then even some of the clients you serve or vendors, to get a really holistic perspective where people feel comfortable sharing tried and true feedback. We also now have things like NPS scores. We have that at RevPartners, where it's NPS but for employees.
Interesting.
Another great way to benchmark how you're doing internally. I have always had a pretty great rapport with everybody that directly reports to me. And so feedback, another thing that we use at RevPartners, not to be a never-ending RevPartners speech.
I mean, that's where you're at, and you're there for a good reason, right?
Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
We have this amazing thing called Feedback is a Gift, where we openly give feedback. It's got a certain format and everything to it, but it's a wonderful way to feel comfortable and confident in always providing continuous improvement to others. And so that's a beautiful thing where we all do this for each other and really, truly understand that feedback is a gift, and the only way you can improve is if you know what's going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is another way that I more recently have come into getting feedback on everyday things that I'm doing.
Interesting. Okay. Do you do anything unique or strange to like practice your craft, to be a better leader? Anything like weird habits, weird hobbies, weird things you might study or read or look into?
I would say that my interest in psychology has certainly helped become a stronger people leader over time. Also, you just have to have a passion for other people's growth and potential, and you have to have care and just really want the best for them. And I think that if you lead with that, you'll find that you're farther ahead of the game than you think you are.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. So okay, let's say that someone is coming into a marketing role, right? And let's get super specific, small business, because that's where most of my clients hang out. So small business, you get hired for a marketing role, you're new to it. Where would you point them to start getting some knowledge so that way they can move with intention and start getting to the impact that they're looking for? Where would you point them?
New to the business, new to the industry, or new to marketing?
Let's just magic wand it and say all three.
Okay. New to marketing, find yourself some great influencers, find yourself some groups. There's some fantastic groups on LinkedIn, on Facebook, whatever social platform you prefer. Take some courses. Pavilion is a great avenue for that. I'm not a huge fan of LinkedIn Learning, but if that's the avenue that you have, it's definitely better than sitting there and just flat out Googling things. Just find your source of education and just be a continuous learner. And I think that resonates both with your marketing craft and your industry craft. There's obviously, when you go over to industry specific, there's trade publications, there's obviously special groups, members of your team you can rely on who are more tenured in that industry. Go to trade shows, go to other industry related events, going over into company stuff. Find a buddy or buddies in your organization that will help you learn the tricks of the trade, so to speak, for your specific organization. And also, there is always going to be a little bit of an element of faking it till you're making it.
It's odd to me because I remember the first time I heard that from a friend of mine, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. And now I feel like so many people, and maybe I was using it badly whenever I was, trying to fake it until I made it or whatever. But now, like I feel like people they've jumped a shark a little bit, I think, with that idea in certain cases, right? And maybe that's me being like way too much on social media and in the circles that I run in. But yeah, where's the line between fake it till you make it and like just lying?
Certainly, you don't want to jump too far, right? The way I have always, in terms of faking it until you make it, you have a foundation, you have a base level, you have maybe even a moderate level understanding. And then what you're doing is you're doing research. So say you're preparing for a meeting that you're quote unquote going to be faking it till you make it. You do as much research on the topic and the goal of that meeting ahead of time so that you're as prepared as humanly possible to go into that meeting and do what you're intended to do. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go try and fly a plane now. No, that is not what I mean by faking it.
So, okay, I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about the gap between being an individual contributor and moving up into that first layer of management to where like you're running a team and you're, guiding and helping as opposed to just doing. And, from a sales perspective, it's super easy to kind of be like, okay, get out of the way. I'm going to go close this kind of situation, right? Because like you kind of like lack the trust or you really need it. How does that show up in marketing, if at all? Like someone who's not really ready to like let go of the doing and isn't really ready to like step into that management role. Like what does that typically look like marketing side?
I would say a lot of young people leaders struggle with that. I myself struggled with that. And, I think it could be a play on personality type. It could be a play on just not understanding fully what your people leadership role includes. And they're like, oh, well, what am I going to do with all my time? If I'm not doing, what am I doing? Right. Yeah. So I think there's a level of comfortability and there's a level of, there's a personality type trait in there that's coming into play. But I feel like most young people leaders do struggle with letting go, not being a micromanager. And I think it's just one of those things that you have to kind of grow through. What I would say is always have a mentor. Always have a mentor. I've had a mentor since the first day of my first career job after college. So when you
Same mentor the whole time?
well, yes, but I have other mentors now too. But yeah,
Wow. Like that to me is is cool and also like kind of astounding, right? Like that you can find, because like careers change and stuff, right? And I've had some really crazy special people like pour into me, but as I continue to grow and evolve and change, I kind of have to put them in like specific lanes, right? Like my old sales coach, I love him to death. We can't talk about social selling because to him, any social media is just prospecting avoidance, right? You should just be hitting the phones and like setting meetings and everything, And so like now, like I try to not have one person that I turn to for all of my questions because, I'm concerned about, drinking too much of the Kool-Aid and taking some bad advice from someone who's not really qualified. So it's beautiful to me and cool that like the same person has been able to be that kind of backstop for you for this whole time. Like, and obviously a huge fan that you have others, but like that's awesome. That's really cool.
well, you need to approach mentorship with a very specific, not a very specific goal in mind, but at least an overarching goal. So this mentor that we're speaking about right now, she is a learning and development coach. So
Interesting.
she helps me be a better leader. She helps me understand the components of leadership. She helps me with coaching and mentoring. And so things like that, you can grow that over time. It's not like a marketer who has a very specific, direction and skill sets. And in terms of that, like it's more of a holistic mentorship.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so that's kind of how this is carried throughout different industries over the course of time and history. So yeah.
Now, so because I'm me, I'm noticing you're not mentioning their name. Do you want to name drop them? Are they like someone who mentors other people? Should we be promoting this person?
Well, she is in the business of coaching, but she's a real colors coach, and then she does a lot of leadership seminars and things of that nature. Her name is Karen Schumacher of Crescendo Leadership Development.
Cool.
And she's fantastic. She's the reason why I'm such a big proponent of real colors. And obviously, I attribute a lot of my success in leadership definitely to the things that she's taught me over the last, oh my goodness, like, I don't even want to say how many years, almost 20.
So, because, there's something I think kind of unique about the mentor-mentee relationship, right? And there's no pulled punches, right? So like the quality of those conversations are in at least in my experience, like if you're not ready to hear it, like you're not going to get anything out of it, right? So you really got to be in the right place, and a lot of that requires trust and having the right trust with people. Have you ever struggled taking advice from your mentor because but then it showed up later as like, oh yeah, I can now see it?
I would say earlier on in my career when I was much younger, feedback was not always a gift.
Okay.
And I think that just over time you learn that if someone is taking the time to have a difficult conversation with you, they care more about you and making you better than the difficult conversation they're having to have with you right now. And so as you start to learn that, you learn that from that is a beautiful thing because they innately care about you.
Yeah. It's easier to avoid the uncomfortable conversation, not say anything at all.
Yep.
Huh. I really like that framing. That's awesome. Shifting gears, I want to be super respectful of your time, and I really appreciate you hopping in and doing this. What pet peeves does Kendra have about marketing? Like, what do you see? What do you run into? What do you read on LinkedIn or in your communities that just like you're over it, makes you roll your eyes, you wish we weren't talking about these kinds of things anymore?
Oh man. You might have stumped me.
Uh-oh.
What used to bug me when I was in-house was obviously what we talked or hit on a little bit earlier, where we're pushing the sales team in prospects' faces too soon, from that customer experience standpoint. And so that was a big pet peeve of mine for a very long time, was, holding back my sales team from pouncing on people, right? Man, in terms of social though, I feel like we're making a really big shift in terms of what we're expecting out of social media. So I can't say that I have necessarily a pet peeve about it, but there's just so much information that's coming at us these days, that I think that we need to really be mindful of what we're putting out there. Because who knows how AI is going to use that in the future, even to think about from that standpoint. But also, we can get lost in the noise if noise is all we're making. So let's be intentional. Let's be purposeful. Let's aim to impact someone's day by what you're sharing. And I think if we all lived by that general high level rule, we would have a really great experience.
Interesting. Okay. When I love that because, I spend a lot of time on social to learn, but also to engage and put up my own content and also just like network. I really enjoy the networking component of this, like way more than I ever thought that I would. Are you okay when you're going to go work on something new? Like let's say you hear about something, you learn about something and you're like, "Oh, I need to go learn more about this." Are you going to turn to books? Are you going to turn to your network? You can turn to podcasts, or you like how do you go about like that immediate? Okay, does Kendra need to learn more about this, or is it just something that's on the periphery and I don't need to do anything about it right now? Like, how would you go about figuring out if that's a priority for you to spend some time in learning and understanding?
Yes, typically I would say I probably search or reach out to my network first to get their referrals or opinions. And then I'd also really well, this sounds terrible, but I'd Google it in terms of finding my own information either directly from the source and having a really great knowledge base. And I think part of the reason why I do that is because of my own background and what I do for a living. Is like, I want to see you excelling. So my expectation is that you're providing me what I need on your website as your single source of truth, right? So I think I just naturally gravitate towards that as a resource because that's what I aim to do for my people, right? So first network, then single source of truth for sure.
Okay, interesting. Who do you follow because you mentioned that the person you're working with now, you started out following them on social. Who else do you follow that is putting out like real talk, like, no fluff, no BS, actionable things that are helpful, not under the guise of trying to get more mileage? Who do you like?
So I'm gonna stick with LinkedIn here specifically as a social because because I'm a geek and I have a strategy for each one of my own personal social medias. So
I'm the exact same.
Yes? Okay, good. I'm glad. I'm not the only person.
No.
But my Instagram is very much for the mom in me, the foodie in me. Like that's who I'm following there. It's not about marketing necessarily. It might happen to me by accident because of my algorithm, no doubt.
Sure.
But, so from a LinkedIn perspective, obviously I follow all of the people that have impacted me or I've made an impact on in my career. So I get a lot of really great pieces in my newsfeed because of that. I don't follow a ton of, what we'd call LinkedIn influencers. I do follow people like Barbara from Shark Tank just because I love her whole background and her story. And I'm interested generally in what she has to say. But I don't follow a lot of those big influencers. I follow people like Wednesday Women and the individuals that actually run Wednesday Women. I obviously follow Yamini and Brian and Dharmesh and HubSpot in general. But really it's a very narrowed following that I am, unless I have direct connection or direct interaction with them.
Interesting. First of all, I thought I was the only person who was like, okay, on LinkedIn, here's how it works out in my head. And I wasn't even going to share this because I don't normally talk about this, but like on LinkedIn, it's like very corporate, business revenue operation stuff is the only stuff that I'm really interested in. And Facebook, which is kind of where like my other big kind of social like network is, it's much more like small business. It's a lot of like high ticket closer and like direct response copy stuff, right? Which I really have found a place to enjoy. And then I hated Instagram, right? Because I wasn't really curating my feed. And so like it was all just like terrible ads trying to sell me agency stuff and like business in a box crap and everything. And then I had a moment where I was like, I didn't even want to open the app, right? And, you know, it was kind of one of those things where I was just feeling old, right? You know, I have a bunch of friends that are about a decade younger than me, and they were all over it. Like, man, why aren't you on here? And I'm like, because it's just like another place to get seen ads that I'm not interested in. And then I started about a year ago to play the guitar, and brand new habit, brand new practice. I started to work with a coach. And now my feed is all for guitar and woodworking and just like artistic stuff. And now it's like this really nice, beautiful place for me to go to and get this like recharge, as opposed to, okay, well, let's see how they're talking about sales and marketing on Instagram versus Facebook, you know, but like really cultivating it so that way it's different. And I thought I was the only person who was doing this, right? So I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one. Okay, so the last question that I have for you, and then I can let you go, right? One of my big purposes and drives in doing this show is to try to like show that everyone does these roles a little bit differently. And can you talk a little bit about being a female and a leader, right? Because for a long time, I didn't really, like I knew that it was different, you know, but until I coached my first female seller, right? And she was kind of talking about how she really couldn't be direct, right, in the same way that I'm direct, right? And I had no basis of understanding of that because I'm just a big, dumb, tall, white guy. Can you talk a little bit about like some of the struggles that you've gone through as a woman leader specifically, right? Like I'm sure like trying to get up to that level as a woman is interesting and difficult, but from the leadership perspective, do you feel any weird adjustments to like do the job well as a woman? Like, do you feel yourself like compromising or doing anything like that on any kind of consistent basis?
Great question. It really depends on the organization that you surround yourself with.
Okay.
I've been a people leader at organizations where I was doing multiple people's jobs when I shouldn't have been, in order to get a seat at the table. I had to prove myself, so I was doing other people's jobs for them. It really is dependent on the organization you immerse yourself in. And I will say that obviously RevPartners and my previous organization are very, very big proponents of women in leadership. They're big proponents of equality and diversity and inclusion. And just never cut yourself short, regardless of whether you're in a leadership position or not. Like, you deserve just as much as everyone else does, and you need to strive for that. And if you're not getting that, if you're not feeling heard, if you're not being heard, there's an organization out there that will listen to you and will care about you and will help you get to where you want to be.
Interesting. So I know some very direct women, right, who are just part of their personality, right? And it leads them to the success that they've had, and they talk about having to like dial it down, right? It sounds like you might be talking about it more on the other side of like, you know, you're punching up and fighting to be heard. Which one do you think is more prevalent? Or do you think it's the same thing?
I think it can be the same thing. I'm oftentimes called a very blunt person, which is why that is my answer. But I think that you're still, if you're very driven, you know, you're willing to use your voice, whether you're heard or not, and you're willing to go above and beyond what you even should be doing in order to get to the place you want to go to. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Interesting. Okay. That brings me to probably my last question, unless you have a super interesting answer that opens up a couple more. Do you think it's easier to be on the inside, on in-house, right? Or do you think it's easier to be on the outside as a consultant, helping specifically around like speaking truth to power, you know, change management, calling things out that don't make sense and stuff, you know, from that perspective, do you think it's easier to be on the inside, or do you think it's easier to be on the outside?
That is a great question. I think that it's quote unquote easier as a consultant because at the end of the day, you're working with your partner to, or your client, however you want to name them. You're working with them with a specific goal in mind, and you're recommending and helping them take action. But if at the end of the day they don't take that action, you can continue to coach them and mentor them and, kind of shake your finger at them and say, hey, this is what
Yep.
we agreed upon. This is where you wanted to get to. You have to take these steps in order to get there. At the end of the day, if they don't own up to their end, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do about that from a consultant's perspective, even though if you even heart of hearts want the best for them and want them to achieve the goal you set out to do together. Whereas internally, you might, as I call being on the hamster wheel, you might be directly affected by that change that's not occurring, but you may still be in the same situation as the consultant, but then you're living with what happens when you don't make the changes that you need to make.
Yeah. Right. And I think the outcome is completely different, right? Like if you're in-house, then you might need to let someone go, right? Versus, if you're on the outside, you can make recommendations, but ultimately it's not really your show, right? And, I tend to go with like people deserve a chance and like, they need coaching and development because, obviously the show exists for this very reason. Have you ever been brought into a project to like clean house?
As it relates to humans, no.
Okay, interesting.
Clean
But as far as
house.
like the brand and the messaging and all that stuff, you've had to like tear it down to the studs before?
Oh my goodness! I think I've done 7 or 8 rebrands in my,
Whoa.
and that's just as my in-house experience.
Oh wow. Okay.
But I also have been brought into organizations to do CRM adoption, which,
Same.
speaking of change management, it is very, very difficult.
Oh my God,
For a
yeah.
lot
Is this
of
gonna
people.
fix everything, John? I'm like, are your people excited about doing the thing, or are you using it as like a really bad leash, and they're all just seeing it as a really bad mousetrap? How it's positioned has a big impact on it. Sorry to cut you off there, but like, the CRM thing is just like, everyone is now, oh, well, as long as we have a single source of truth, yes, but your people have to be excited to use that single source of truth, right? And you have to position it so that way they are excited about it, or else you're just tapping your foot and micromanaging. And did you update that deal in the pipeline? And it's a nightmare if you don't do it the right way. Interesting. Okay. I've been brought in a couple of times, and the unspoken expectation is that I'm going to let everyone go, and then I kind of have to be like, that's you need to find someone else if I'm just supposed to torch it down to the ground and start over. That's not really how I work. I was curious if that happened in your roles. Very interesting. Kendra, I want to be super respectful of your time. I think I could probably talk to you for about another day and a half, but I know you have a happy hour to go to, and I do not want to get in the way of that at all. This has been really, really awesome, and I really appreciate the time. If someone wants to come learn more about you or RevPartners, where should they go?
You know what? Feel free to send me a direct message on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to chat through anything I can do to support you. I'm happy to do so. So yeah, send me a DM on LinkedIn. Otherwise, you can go to RevPartners website, check it out. But yes, DM me for sure. And I'd be happy.
Awesome. All right, Kendra, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Cheers.